It's 4 o'clock on a Monday. You know what that means. It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Oh, must be time to change the battery. This week starring special guest star, Mr. Jon Flanagan. Yeah. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thank you, Michael.
For those of you who were at the road rally this year, last year, or many years, you probably know the aforementioned Mr. Flanagan because he has been on panels and talk classes many, many times at the road rally. And I always tell people that he is maybe the only totally legit, honest radio promoter that I've ever met, having been in the music industry for 40 years. It's a black art, radio promotion, but it doesn't have to be. Let me get the chat room open and say hello to you guys. All right, people showing up. And John and I were talking about this before the show. We'd be remiss if we didn't send our heartfelt thoughts and prayers to the people of France for Friday's unthinkable act. So,
and I think this event hits us in the music world hard for the first time because this was a mass killing at a rock concert.
Yeah.
And we know those guys, the Eagles of Death Metal. Now,
I don't because I'm not hip enough, but I know of them.
So this hits our music community for the first time.
Yeah.
And I just say, I've been saying this, but I heard Bill Maher say this on HBO this last week, that when they talk to these terrorists and ask them, why are you killing us? Why are you bombing us? They say, you have troops in our Holy Land. And Bill Maher said on his show, let's get out of there. So
no, I don't want to get political on the show because we don't do that. But in any case, just our thoughts and prayers go out to the people of France. Nobody should be at the wrong end of a gun. Anyway, so John is a radio promoter, as I said before, and it's a lot of people think they need radio promotion or want radio promotion, but they don't really understand what a radio promoter does. And when John and I were talking about doing the show together today, he said, why don't we talk about the things they need to have, the ducks they need to have in a row before they're really ready for radio promotion? And the first thing on his list, if I remember correctly, was branding. And so he and I have spoken about branding before. You guys know that I've spoken to you about branding before. So I'm going to steal about 2 minutes here and then turn John loose with a bunch of really good answers to my lengthy list of questions. The definition of branding, as found on Entrepreneur Magazine's website, is the marketing practice of creating a name, symbol, or design that identifies and differentiates a product from other products. Simply put, your brand is your promise to your customer. It tells them what they can expect from your products and services, and it differentiates, there's that word again, your offering from that of your competitors. Your brand is derived from who you are, who you want to be, and who people perceive you to be. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. The next paragraph's not as succinct as that. So once again, your brand is derived from who you are, who you want to be, and who people perceive you to be. So what is branding in the context of musicians?
Exactly that. And one of the issues that just came up in a discussion with one of the taxi members was she had multiple pictures on different things. She had a postcard that had one picture. She had her CD that had another picture. She had a poster that had another picture. An
actual headshot of her or something? Or I mean, of her?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the main concept of branding for artists, for taxi artists, music artists, is when you're unknown, you want to establish one image, and then you use that image across all marketing platforms. So which is why I think it's important to pick the image well in the beginning, because that's the one you're going to be using, or I'll say stuck with, through the whole campaign, which can be 6 months or 9 months of a campaign for a release. So you're wanting, and when I told her that, she said, "Oh, well, I don't want my longtime fans to get tired of the same image."
Right.
And the response is that it's fine if they get tired of it. They're already your fans, but that is not our target. Our target is the million people who don't know you yet. So we need to brand your look into those million people. Don't worry about the people that are already fans.
Then how do the folks watching the show today know which image is the best? Because as we discussed on the panel at the Road Rally, we get photos here, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you we get photos of shirtless guys with the guitar strapped on, standing in their home studio up against a rack of gear. Like, look at me, I own a rare Strat in a rack of really cool gear, and I've got skin. And yes, that's exactly the look that we make when we see these things, thinking, really, your wife didn't stop you from sending this in? So how do they know what a good shot is?
His wife needs to go shopping next week. She can't say anything negative.
Buy the guy a T-shirt for the first item you buy. Sorry.
The answer is, there are some people. There's a portion of your taxi members, there's a portion of the population that are very self-aware and can pick their own good styling. But that is a small percentage of the population. Most of us need to be coached through, that doesn't look good, or that doesn't look good. I mean, we see this, you see this all the time when you watch TV and watch the major stars. Sometimes you see a star come out in an outfit that just looks horrific, and you go, who authorized that?
In many cases, though, they probably hired a stylist, and it's the emperor's new clothes. Like, oh, you look fabulous in that.
Yes.
And they go out, on the red carpet thinking they look fabulous. And when Joan Rivers was still alive, she would let them know the morning after how fabulous they did not look.
You're reminding me that you cannot trust anybody close to you to tell you the truth, because everybody is going to be sensitive of your feelings. You have to go to a stranger. And what happens a lot, I think what Michael's referring to with me being an honest promoter, is most promotion companies, when you send them your material, they'll say yes to anything that has money behind it.
Right.
And because I want my reputation to be strong with the radio stations, I can't say yes to everything. So I end up saying no to a lot of music, saying that is not ready for radio. You need to go back in the studio, rewrite, change the intro, work on a better hook. So I think that's what I became known for, was the first promotion guy who would say no.
Well, and that goes to the fact that you're almost acting in an A&R capacity then, because you're not only culling the good from the bad, but you're helping them make something good into something great, because you don't want to blow your... It's like taxi. We can't forward music that is B plus or A minus, because that door won't be open a month later. Sorry, I've got a growly stomach.
Which leads me into, I wanted to make sure that I complimented the taxi convention. For anybody that didn't go this year, you missed the best convention that there ever was.
Thanks, Mom.
The organization that you and Angel do is just phenomenal. I remember you talk, just the amount of details, the amount of classes and panels and people is just mind-numbing. And
yes, it is.
and I'm still wearing my badge. I haven't taken it off since the convention.
And hasn't taken the shirt off either.
Because this badge actually is helping me get free stuff around town. I'm kidding. But my point was...
A free ride in a taxi, maybe.
My point was leading up to the songwriting level is what is astounding me. I have listened to, at this point, several of the submissions that I received this year, but as I did the mentor panels, many of the musicians who came up to me just had hits, and there were so many, and that is my point, is these taxi classes and reviews are working. This was the best year of hits that I've ever heard.
I got the same phone call, I think Thursday or Friday of last week. Michael Lloyd, the guy's done 100, I think, 100 gold and platinum records in his career.
Wow.
And he called me up and he said, I got to tell you, they're really, I see it year after year how it keeps getting 10, 15, 20% better. And it's because people keep coming back and they do improve. They're absorbing and they're going home and utilizing what they learned. So kudos to you guys.
And I want to hear more hits.
So when you go, when you go to a radio station, your success or failure as a promoter is based on your relationships with the program director, or who do you have to impress that you're not going to waste their time?
Okay, that seemed like it ended up being two different questions.
Could be. I woke up at 3 this morning.
And we're wishing Michael's daughter the best of travels.
Thank you. I had to take her to the airport. Okay,
the first part was my success with the radio station, and that answer is all about the song.
Okay.
I cannot be, friends with a radio station and then ask the favor, hey, could you take 3 minutes on your radio station, which you could sell for $3,000, and could you put one of my mediocre, I mean, not mine, but some other promoter who has a mediocre artist, that promoter would say to the station, hey, put this mediocre record on because I'm your friend. That will never happen.
Well, everybody watching the show right now is probably saying, really? Payola doesn't exist?
Payola does not. I'm glad you're bringing that up in case anybody doesn't know, but payola does not exist anymore.
But it used to.
Yes. And so I'm talking about now.
Right.
If we want to use that example of payola and a mediocre song, one of the most, and the reason that payola does not exist anymore is because of the blow up that happened when they took the Jessica Simpson song to radio with I can't remember the label, I think it was RCA. They took it in there with, a $500,000 radio budget. So they were handing out cash to every pop station in the country, and none of the pop stations wanted to play it because it was a mediocre song, but they had the relationships with RCA, and they knew they didn't want to say no to RCA, and RCA was giving them money, and they found the email trail of the program director up in New York, not New York City, and they found the email saying, hey, and he literally said, I am a whore this week. Do you have any money with this record?
Wow. So remember that. If you're going to use, if you're going down the payola road, don't send emails. There's a lesson to be learned there. All right. So
payola ended with that case.
It went to court. I mean, or it was a criminal prosecution, wasn't it? I mean, it upended everything.
Yes. And so all laws changed across all networks, and so payola. So the distinction is that I can give, let's say I'm doing an indie artist campaign, and we talked about how if in a strong market commercial radio station, they have new music testing shows. And let's say that I could get my independent artist who has a strong song and get it on that major market testing show where they give it a test. And so I want to bump up the attention for my artist there. So I will offer the station like $100 iTunes gift certificate to do a little contest where they say to their listeners, hey, this next artist is a new artist, and we have a $100 iTunes certificate. If you can go to that artist's website and find a little piece of information and then text us back with that piece of information about the band, just something trivial.
Right.
And then they will give that $100 prize.
So that's kosher?
To a listener. So giving prizes to a station, or even giving cash. When KISS FM gives cash prizes, that cash came from a promoter.
Got it.
It came from a record company. So giving them prizes, which they give to listeners, is legal. That is not payola.
Okay.
Pale is when they stick it in their pocket. If I gave them that gift card and then the guy put it in his pocket, that would be illegal, but that is not happening at all because of the court cases.
So the people watching the show today, I'm guessing, are thinking, well, what's realistic for me? How can I get my stuff on radio? And do I have any shot at getting it on, like a big station, Kiss FM in Los Angeles or whatever in Chicago, one of the tier one markets? Does that ever happen?
What they're looking for is, you first need to understand that they have millions of listeners. And so they're thinking in terms of every minute. The program directors of radio stations are worried that the people driving in their cars are going to change the channel at any second.
Which has gotten easier than ever because of digital tuners.
Not to mention voice-activated. Yeah. Switch channels.
Come on. Do any of you really know how to use the voice-activated stuff in your car? I've got it in my car, and I've tried. I even went back to the dealership and had the guy sit in there and show me how to use it. Still doesn't work, but okay. In theory, it does.
Well, that's why I ran late today, is I got behind the wheel, and I said, drive to taxi. And it didn't go.
Amazing. An Uber car.
Okay, so so in answer to can artists do it? Yes, you can, and so that is the message of the seminars that I give at Taxi, is to pass on the hints and tips so that you can do this yourself. Getting radio airplay is not a hard job. It's really the job of knowing you have a good song to start, then knowing which radio stations, which format your music is aimed for. Right now we're having a debate where we have an artist that has a little bit of an urban sound, but is also a little AAA leaning. And so, it isn't exactly one or the other, so we're sort of, figuring out where to position it.
You could make that argument for hip hop in the country market. Whoever thought you'd hear hip hop beats under a country song, and radio had to adapt to that because the demographic was younger. They grew up on hip hop, but yet they listened to country.
That's a great example.
So let's go. Let's go back to branding for a minute.
Well, let me just add on the Taxi members getting onto a major station. So I just wanted to make sure that I clearly put that image in your mind, that even though you have a great song, you mentioned the stations in Los Angeles, but the major markets all around the country, they have millions of listeners. They're worried their listeners are going to change the dial. And so even if they love your song, that isn't enough for them to just go, I'm giving them 3 minutes in front of my millions of people. They're going to look at your social profile. They're going to look at what action you have, how many tickets you're selling in that town. So if you're doing a show where you're selling 10 tickets at a local club, even though your song is fantastic, that station is going to say they just don't have enough presence in our city for my millions of listeners to know them. And so even though it's a great song, the listeners aren't going to recognize the first 30 seconds, and they're going to hit that button to the next station. So,
which ultimately results in lower ad dollars coming in for the station, which is their lifeblood. Less listeners, less money.
So in LA here, in LA, the biggest radio market in the world, because New York, we don't care about that.
Don't say that on air. Okay, yeah.
Oh, right. Well, not you New Yorkers.
Yeah, it's 4:20. Let's wrap up this point.
Okay. What was that point?
We were talking about the largest radio market being LA, that you can't get on.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that somebody who is building the buzz, and their first show, they sold 20 tickets, and then their next show, they sold 60, and the next show, 100. So the big radio station loves to see a growing buzz. So if you are having a small story in your major market that is growing and growing and growing, and the radio station sees, hey, this musically is looking like the way modern trends are going, and the buzz is growing. Let's give them a 3-minute shot.
Got it. So you've got to have traction to get traction.
That's a great phrase.
Well, I'm going to trademark it now or copyright it or something. Well, that's the nature of the industry. It's always chicken or the egg, and people want that magic pill that, hey, I'm going to pay Jon Flanagan, X amount of dollars to get my stuff on radio, but you can't do it unless they've got something going on. Now let's talk about smaller markets. Let's talk about my favorite place to reference on the show, Peoria, Illinois, which I'm guessing, I grew up in a farm town, Illinois. I'm guessing Peoria has a few 100,000 people in it. I could be wrong. Maybe it's 75,000. Whatever it is, it's a smaller market, right?
Yes.
Okay, so is it easier for these folks to get on that station, or do the same rules apply, and is this bar equally as high?
Well, I think they all know the answer, which is yes. The smaller the target, the easier it is to knock over. And so that is exactly what we do when we're hired to promote independent artists. The first thing we do is to focus on the big markets. I'm sorry. The
little markets.
The smaller markets, with the hope that the action in the smaller markets leads to the bigger markets.
So the bigger markets actually watch what's going on in the smaller markets and take their cues from that to some extent?
They're not looking at every small market station and if they see an ad from a new band going, oh my gosh, I'm dying to know what that is. It isn't that closely watched. But what we're hoping to do is to get airplay on 20 or 30 small market stations. And then we have enough of a story where we could say to the big market that is near those 20 small markets saying, hey, look, you got 20 guys around you that are playing it, which means you have this many people or they're familiar with this song now. Could you listen to it again and maybe give it a try?
Because their reach, just due to wattage in their broadcast range, is far enough. So if somebody's breaking out in Centralia, Illinois, and Peoria, Illinois, eventually, or Cairo, Illinois, and those are all relatively close to St. Louis, which would be probably a tier 2 market, maybe?
Which one?
No, St. Louis.
St. Louis is a major market.
Oh, okay.
Top 50.
All right. So if you get on 20 stations that are all within 100 miles of St. Louis, then eventually St. Louis may play it. And that's how the little people become bigger people and get noticed by those stations.
And it made me think to maybe say the thing about calling the radio stations now.
Oh, yes. I asked him about this at the road rally, and I said, but can't you use social media to get all your friends to call the station and request it? And his very brilliant answer was
that, and I wanted to back up to the smaller market station. So I'm going with this scenario where somebody in our viewing audience is having a song on their local small market station, and they've done the homework. They have gone to an outside third-party professional to help them choose which is their best radio song, because we're going to cover that later. So among all your songs, we need the best hook. It's shocking to me in the demos that I received at Taxi how many of them have the best song in the middle of the CD. And if I wasn't doing the person a favor and listening to the full CD, I would have never gotten to that good song. So having an outside professional, through your Taxi representatives, Taxi is made to help you guys find your single. So
I didn't ask him to say this.
So that's exactly what Taxi is they are your third-party outside person who is not going to lie to you and is going to say, hey, go back to the studio. So you have your best song, and then you have your branding, which we didn't cover fully, but making sure that the image that you... Now, one thing to say to save people a lot of time is people are so obsessed over professional photo shoots and professional videos, and that game is done. It's all on iPhones now. You don't even need to buy video cameras or professional cameras anymore because the quality on these iPhones is phenomenal. And there's a trend in the industry that if you're not a million selling, Christina Aguilera type artist, you don't need a big fancy photo shoot. So it can be just something, a simple photo with no cost involved for you that expresses your style.
Okay.
Making sure of that.
Let me ask you about expressing style, because we get photos all the time where women are in various stages of undress, men with their shirts off.
Could you send me those pictures?
No. The point is, people try to, they use sex to sell, which they see on TV and magazines all the time, but let me rephrase this. What's the best thing they can do when deciding what that photograph should be? A face shot, a full body shot, up against some sort of background. I mean, we see people send in shots that look like they were done by a yearbook photographer up against the splotchy backdrop, the paper. We see it all. So is there kind of a rule of thumb about, and I imagine it'd be different for a rock band than it would be for a singer-songwriter or a different type of artist?
I'm going to answer that, but I wanted to give your members this option. You do not need artwork to present your product. Major labels, when they would send even Madonna's first single to the radio, there would not be any artwork because the artwork wasn't done yet. And so they would just send the disc with Madonna's name on it and the information, clear jewel case, and if anybody has not heard me say this yet, never use a cardboard thin sleeve. You always want to have a full spine. I noticed here in Michael's office, he's got a stack of CDs, and this is exactly what we're talking about here, is having, the spines where you can read the artist's name, as opposed to...
Everybody's freeze framing now to see if their name was on that spine. As opposed
to this thin jewel case, which... Sitting here, when Michael turns around and looks at these CDs, he doesn't know who this is. So never use a thin jewel case. I wanted to bring that up to the to disc makers, to Tony, and say, you're enabling these musicians into saving a few pennies but having less...
Look, a lot of people do it because they want to save paper or not use a lot of plastic, and they'll send out stuff, but... I do agree with you, because nobody can see this on camera, but over there, 10 feet away from us, I've probably got 3,000 to 5,000 CDs in a little corner office within my office. And absolutely, I go over there and I turn on the light and I go, there they are. And if they are thin, I don't find them.
The famous phrase, penny wise,
pound foolish,
dollar foolish, and... Why, I had to change it in case some people are not familiar with pounds. But, that phrase is saying that on cardboard sleeves, you're saving a few pennies, but your music is not getting heard because nobody can find it.
Well, let's ask the obvious question, which is, do CDs still matter?
For indie artists who are submitting to radio, you need a hard copy CD. The major artists, major labels switched over to digital distribution to save money, but the radio stations are waiting for Madonna's digital file. They're not waiting for your digital file. So your digital file arrives with 1,000 other artists, and they're not going to listen to it. So you need hard copy for radio.
If somebody can't afford you or another promoter, and they want to approach a radio station to get played, what should they do? How do they get noticed?
So you got your best song. I'm interrupting your flow of questions because you brought up about the artwork, and I wanted to make that point that you don't need artwork. You can just send a disc. But back to your question about what should that image you were asking about, a close-up of the face or what, that cannot be answered in a general way, because that is going to vary according to every different musical style
Okay.
and their and person. So not only their musical style, but who they are, what they look like, what is their best thing. One of the ones, this is a pretty well-known act, and they came to me and they wanted to have themselves in front of motorcycles, and they are a singer-songwriter type group who play acoustic guitars, but they wanted to be in front of motorcycles for the cover of their album. I was like,
because they love motorcycles?
Yes.
Okay.
I was like, oh, so you're a biker. So you want the people at the radio stations to know that you have hard rock biker music. He said, oh, no, I just want them to know that I like motorcycles. You want radio to know you like motorcycles.
That's the kind of thing we see often.
So having that third person look at it, maybe we can, give your members some help, and we can critique their looks too. I'll send them back an email going, no.
And I will give you his home address. Talk about something touchier than critiquing their music might be critiquing their look. All right, so how do you get a radio station? Let's assume that it's a smaller market radio station, and you've got your finished CD, you've got a nice spine on it, you've got a good photograph, you've gotten help from your friends and family, you've gotten help from a stranger, forget friends and family, to help you pick the best song you should lead with, the single, all that stuff going for you. How then do you get the radio station to even open the package?
And this is the part that you're going to do the same as I do, is you call the radio station or email. I mean, you're doing both. You're calling and emailing, and you're saying, hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up, about to land on your desk. I mean, I do this, but for you as a stranger to the station, I would not recommend calling ahead of time. But I call ahead of time and I say, hey, I'm working a new group and they're coming. But you mail it, give it a week to arrive, and then call. First, it's good to start with an email to give them the chance to save time. So start with an email, and in the subject of the email, the name of your band, and did you receive CD? And so you're starting this, dialogue, and then what we do, the general framework is week after week, you politely ask, did you receive this CD? You get no answer because they don't know you. Second week, hey, just wondering if you received that CD. No answer. Third week,
they get a restraining order. Sorry, I know I threw him off his game with that one.
So that is the process: is repetition of bugging them over and over, and then finally.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Well, I just want to know how long you do that before they think you're a pain in their ass.
Generally, well, in our case, with each message, we're hoping the message gets better. Hey, we got some other stations last week. Did you hear it yet?
You're a professional and you know how to craft a story. These guys are nobody in the eyes of the radio station. So, So
they would say, hey, we booked a show down at Joe's Tavern. Just wanted to let you know. Did you listen to our CD yet? Then the next week, hey, we did that show. We sold 20 CDs at the show. We had it went well. Did you listen to the CD? So you're showing them a story building in your town, and you're hitting up blogs and your social media, and so you're feeding that story. Obviously, you don't want to leave them your life story if you're leaving them a phone message, or this is bringing up another point that just kills me, is the volume, the amount of information that people are putting in emails is just overwhelming. Forget about the whole bio thing.
They don't care if you were the star student in Mrs. McGillicuddy's choir class in third grade, right? They only
Well,
want.
she had good ears.
Is it a true statement like it would be for record labels? They just want to know what you've got going on right now, and it's got to be really short, like 3 or 4 sentences in
They
paragraphs.
actually have no, I mentioned this on the panel. When the package arrives, it goes into 2 stacks. I mean, look at your stack here. It's all CDs. You don't have any paperwork there.
Right.
They want you because it's all about the song.
Now,
and so
the paperwork, John.
there you go. There's
the paperwork.
It's over there.
3 feet away in a stack that will eventually, probably, sadly, between Christmas and New Year's, get filed in a garbage can.
And so if it was a professional scenario, I mean, if not in this taxi setting, but I meant in the radio situation, generally they're separating it into 2 piles, and then your dream is that within a timely manner, they listen to your CD, they fall in love with it, and then they're like, oh, well, this is the 3rd one that came in, so let's check this stack of papers and find the 3rd paper that came in, and okay, here, but that's likely not going to happen.
So this is where branding ties it all together, is because now you've hit them multiple times, and if you've got a good photo and you stick with the same one, and that photo is up in the corner of your email, it triggers a little thing in your brand to go, oh, it's them again.
Yes, where people have a different photo on their email from the, that
Watch
picture.
on the desk, you're vibrating the camera. It's a high budget studio we've got going.
That was an earthquake.
Yes. God, no, we don't need those.
That I want to say this thing, that the picture that is on the front of the CD is your primary image across all marketing platforms for the entire length of the release.
Okay.
I'm going to trademark that.
Yeah, I like it. Let's talk about something, and I only want to maybe spend 5 minutes on this, but we were talking about branding before the show started in regard to not only getting your stuff on radio, but people don't realize that it also affects your ability to get stuff in TV shows and movies. Now, not so much if you're doing instrumental cues, although it could play into that a little bit, but for singer-songwriters, or we were talking about a punk band.
Well, even for your instrumental people, the ones who did not brand themselves correctly.
I'll
Remember
get
that?
let's not get tangential, though. I'll get back to that.
Okay. I was just going to say, you instrumental people are in here, too. So.
You are, but the same thing applies. John and I were discussing this, and the same thing applies. We have actually had requests from music libraries and from music supervisors where they have said, we'd prefer to have an artist that's got some traction, whether that's reflected in social media or the number of people that go to their shows or radio airplay, any of those things. And so John said, yeah, given the opportunity, 2 equal pieces of music, equally well suited for a particular scene in a TV show, that they would probably fall off the fence in favor of the act that's got traction. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think you're giving me a setup question, Michael. Everybody knows the answer to that. You want to...
No, you'd be surprised.
Really?
A lot of people have never thought about this stuff, and we try to enlighten.
Okay.
We're in the business, so we deal with it all the time,
okay.
But not everybody else is.
People, if the end result is to sell products, then you want to have the maximum number of people accept that product. And so preliminary research that shows the viability of a product is exactly what a marketing person wants to see. So if you have any type of presence or traction, anything going on among that list of radio and social and clubs and anything, reviews in your local newspaper, any of that stuff shows the marketing person that there is traction happening, which means that the mass audience is accepting of this product. And so then there is more of a likelihood that you're going to be successful to their even bigger audience, as opposed to an artist who has a great song but has no traction. So if you're a music supervisor, I'd imagine if you have a song that's rated a 9 with no traction, and you have a song rated an 8 with traction, I think you take the traction.
Maybe
Okay.
I'm going with 2 9s or 2 10s actually. I'm saying all things
Oh
being
yeah,
equal,
definitely.
that
That's
I think the supervisors would go with the one that's got traction, and the
definitely
reason
definitely.
is that it speaks to the demographic of the people watching the show, and it's proven to speak to that demographic. So it fits nicely in their world, which they want things to do. Again, I'm going to repeat that. That's if all other things are equal. If both songs are equally as good and both of them work equally well in the scene, my opinion is that they would go with the act that's got a bit of a brand name going on. And this all goes back to what John was talking about earlier, which is branding. And it goes back to the photo. It could go back to the font that you've chosen. People often feel compelled to use these flowery, squirrely, squiggly fonts.
That
And
you
you,
can't read.
right, you look at the damn thing and go, what the hell?
What letter is that?
I forgot to turn my ringer off.
Yes, branding is making sure that your image matches your product. Um, and then having a succinct image, not having scattered images
Um, let's see,
or
where did I?
multiple images. I didn't.
Um, I'm trying to find out what we've covered on my list and what we haven't. I got distracted by my phone going nuts there for a second. So, how did these folks watching the show figure out who their demographic is when I find in most cases they don't really know? And some of you guys are going to send me hate mail. Some of you are going to be a little embarrassed to go, yep, I do that. I would contend that if you walk up to 10 random musicians, maybe not the Road Rally, because our members are better educated. They really truly are from watching Taxi TV and going to the rally. But if you were at any place else where you would walk up to 10 musicians randomly and say, what kind of music do you do? Most of them would say, I do a little rock, I do a little pop, I do a little country, and that's because they're trying to show their versatility, thinking they apply their music would appeal to a wide swath of people. Is that a good thing, appealing to a wide swath of multi-genre people, or do you prefer niche artists?
What popped into my mind is the similarity between that scenario and then having different pictures of your
Right,
act.
good point.
So you've got a picture that has you in a country outfit, and you got a picture in a biker outfit. You've got a song that's got a little country to it. You got a song that's a little rock and roll, which plays to that point that I just made. Is you don't want to confuse your targets, your audience, with multiple images because you want the brain to focus on one image. So when you're unknown, Madonna, I keep bringing her up, I don't know why, but she can afford to have one song be a little country and one song be a little rock and roll because she's selling millions of records. But when you're unknown, when you're on the level of anybody who's well, not every taxi member, but if you're an independent musician who is not well known,
Right.
then you need to establish one genre and keep working within that genre until you have success on that genre before you can move on.
And quite a bit of success, not just like you're starting to become successful and then you move on, but you're probably like on your third record and really kind of branded. Like we all know what Adele sounds like and what we can expect, which goes back to the original statement about branding. That your customers know what they can expect from you. We know pretty much what we can expect from Lord or Adele or Kings of Leon.
You know exactly what they're going to sound like.
Yeah, give or take. They may move the ball 15%
As
left
they
or right.
get bigger, they can move further.
Right,
In the beginning, you got a narrow focus.
right, which is marketing 101.
That's a great little image.
Yeah.
Um,
We're going to start the Church of Little Focus.
but regarding that point about your members not exactly knowing their musical styles are are discussed in terms of radio formats. That there's country,
Yeah.
that there's AAA singer-songwriter.
Is that still around, AAA?
KCRW is our.
Okay.
There are AAA singer-songwriters is my personal specialty. We also do rock, but the public radio stations around the country are the non-commercial AAA stations, and then in major markets around the country where the demographic allows, they will have a AAA commercial station. In Seattle, it's called the Mountain, and these are the stations that became famous when Sheryl Crow and Dave Matthews became famous. Those stations, all of a sudden, their listenership grew because everybody wanted to hear Dave Matthews.
It was almost a revolt against
pop radio.
Well, I would argue that Nirvana was the revolt against pop radio, even though their songs were in a pop structure. They were basically pop songs with crunchy guitars. But
they were a revolt against the hair bands.
Yeah. So something's always revolting against its predecessor. But yeah, I remember when Dave Matthews and Sheryl Crow, people were ready to listen to something that didn't grate on their ears. And they were the saviors to those who felt that way.
So there are 60 commercial AAA stations around the country, and there are 60 big public radio stations that play AAA music. So when we do a AAA singer-songwriter campaign, we target those 120 stations across the United States, and which is a very wide coverage. And we're doing that simple job, following up week after week, asking them to listen. Then after they've listened, see if they are willing to play it, then calling them week after week to find a spot on the station. And so generally it's taking about 2 months to get a good initial spins, your first seven spins.
And those are called ads. Well, getting a station to play you.
So that Sunday night show on the commercial station, the testing show, that's not an ad because it's just a test.
Right. But if the test goes well?
One of the other terms they use is spiking the song. And that's just referring to they spike the song in the middle of their playlist as a one-off. When a station is chosen to be added into full rotation, that's a very big decision because they're at least committing to 7 times a week or 10 times a week. So they're committing to 30 minutes a week for that song.
Wow.
And that's a lot of money for a...
And how many stations out of the 120 that you guys would pitch a AAA singer-songwriter act to, of the 120, at what point would you guys be high-fiving each other going, all right, we did good? And that is going on the premise that you've got the right song from the right artist with the right image, all those ducks leading up to it in a row, and you guys have made the 3 phone calls, followed up with the 3 or whatever, number of phone calls and emails, and everything's starting to hum. How many stations should an artist be happy, like, wow?
In our office, when we get the first spin, we break open the champagne.
Okay.
And then we... I thought I was going to get a bigger laugh.
No, because that's breaking through the wall.
My point was that every spin, every ad, any accomplishment, we consider a victory because it's such a hard landscape.
And
there's nothing we're taking for granted. It's like, oh my God, we got 2 public ads this week. Yes,
and then
it's a start.
Able to leverage that. Got to watch with the hands. I'm telling you, on the other end, they're going.
Sorry.
So you're able to.
Sorry about that. I'm the one hitting the desk.
You're able to leverage. Can you then, when you send out your emails and phone calls in week number 4 or 5 or 6,
yes,
say we got an ad in Des Moines last
week? Each time, everything that's accomplished that week is then put into the story for the next week.
Got it. All right. Let's go back to film and TV for a second. John made a reference earlier to instrumental composers. I actually went on our forum at forums.taxi.com before the show, and I spent 5 minutes looking around for Taxi members that were doing some sort of branding. which I applaud them for doing, because better to have something than nothing. And I'm not going to mention any names, but I'm going to read you the taglines, which some people might call a unique selling proposition, which in marketing parlance is a USP. An example of that would be Taxi is the world's leading independent A&R company. We were the first and we are the biggest. So if you're the world's leading, nobody else can be. You occupy that space in the mind of the buyer. So here's one: multi-genre music producer for film and TV, which in my opinion is better. At least you know the person's doing film and TV and that they do multiple genres. But as John would say,
I would rather if he chose two to start.
right. And then the next person had one which was interesting: evocative music for media. And what do you think about that one?
Well, we were saying that evocative is a term that has some depth to it, but it doesn't refer to any musical style. So if a music producer is searching through looking for a rock track and he sees evocative, that does not speak to him at all as he's looking for rock. So if he could say evocative rock, I mean, put some genre in there.
It's tough for these guys because a lot of the better people who've been doing it a while, they have grown into doing many genres. In the beginning, they may be really good at just orchestral or just solo jazz, cocktail piano or something. Eventually, over time, they grow into doing probably 4, 5, 6 genres really well. But I do agree with you that it's like picking your single.
Well,
lead with your best foot forward.
I don't. I'm not an I don't really know much about the placement. Oh, sorry, guys. I don't know much about the placement business because my business is radio and radio singles. But from what you just said, an idea popped into my mind, which may be useless. If you were saying,
break out the champagne. Sorry.
That if you have a semi-successful composer,
yeah,
and you were saying he's doing multiple genres, then what I think would be catchier. So you're saying that this semi-known composer is not known by the people he's pitching to. He's had some success, but these people don't know him. Is that right?
It's not entirely right, because they could be pitching to music libraries, which are film and TV specific publishers. And it could be that, oh yeah, I met you at the Road Rally. My friend who's already in your catalog introduced us over a beer. So I can't say that they're always completely unknown.
Well, let me get to the idea that popped into my mind. Then instead of saying evocative music, what I would do if this person has previous successes is I would list the successes.
Great idea. And then I looked at one of our members who I know very well, and he had a great page. As soon as you go to his homepage, it had a whole bunch of logos from the shows and networks that his music has been on. So while that's not maybe great in a business card format, but
it could be.
Could, I guess, could be an elevator speech. I've had music on Discovery Channel, MTV, and blah, blah, blah. Instant credibility.
We had that. There was one of the guys that came to my mentor, Joe Cat was his name, and he has at NBA games, they play his song during the halftime.
Okay.
And that is just that name recognition, to be able to say in your first 5 seconds, "Hi, my name's Joe Cat, and I have a song that's playing at halftime at the NBA games." Immediately, you're curious about his career, and you want to hear it.
Right. There's some credibility acknowledged. So then we found another person who underneath, it's like Bob Smith Music, and underneath it simply says orchestral/electronic/ethnic. And you and I were both nodding our heads going, there's a guy who gets it. Because just like branding in the radio and records world, this also applies for film and TV, in that this guy's strength is in orchestral, electronic, and ethnic. You know what to expect.
You have a very clear vision of where he exists in the music world, and that is what everybody needs to be able to do is name two styles of music that encompass your music, two of the formats, two of the radio formats: rock, rap, country, rock, singer-songwriter, rock. So two words that have your style, and then if you can also reference a famous artist that you sound like, that gives the person who's listening to you or reading your material a very clear image of what you are.
Sorry, I got distracted by Gareth Ebbs typing in all caps saying, Michael, sorry I'm late. You don't have to apologize, Gareth. Thank you so much for another amazing rally. You're welcome, Gareth.
Well, thanks for interrupting our interview.
I saw Gareth by the elevator for like a split second. Our eyes met, and he said something about, am I the only one here from Ireland, or something to that effect. I can't remember. And I went, Gareth, how are you? I remember he's a great guy.
Is he Irish?
He is Irish.
Does he live in Seattle?
No, he comes from, he comes over from Dublin, I believe, for the rally.
Well, being a Flanagan, I definitely want to know him.
Oh, there you go.
But there was an Irish guy from Seattle in my class, and so I thought it would be coincidental. So
and we've got Amanda Erie in there. She also is from Ireland, and she's watching us from Ireland right now.
Would that be pronounced Irie?
Irie, I don't know. You know?
I think that's how they say it in Ireland.
Irie. That would definitely be in Jamaica.
Yours was the hand written on the disc.
What?
Yours was the... Okay.
I lost it.
I guess they're all talking to each other about the rally.
Oh, they talk to each other all the time. They never pay attention to us.
Oh, okay.
Ever. That's actually, it's like a regular crowd of people that get together and hang out over a coffee or a beer or whatever while we do the show every week. But they're all in different places all over the world.
Which is cool.
So I'm going to come to you guys in about 2 minutes with other questions from you. But let's go back to the concept of this. Sorry, there's a car alarm going off out there. The concept of smaller market, mid-sized market. Every now and then, something will blow up that's completely indie and started out small, but it's a rare thing, right? It's not. I'm trying to make the point that they shouldn't think I'm going to go hire a radio promoter, give you a couple $1,000s for whatever period of time or however many
3 or 4 months.
Okay, and you are going to make me famous. The odds of that happening, not that great. Right?
No, you don't get famous on a $3,000 budget. What we're happy to achieve is, let's take the singer-songwriter format. We also work rock, so that's a whole different group of stations. But let's say we're working a singer-songwriter act. We mail it out to those 160 powerful AAA radio stations, commercial and public. And these stations have, combined, they would have 20 million listeners at least. I've never even done a combined number on them. But even if we only got spun a few times on those stations where it was exposed to those millions of people, even if the record does not become a huge hit, we have branded the name of that musician in.
Yeah. I'm sorry, watching the picture.
Sorry.
Yeah, you branded the name of that musician. Well, they're not paying
attention anyway. So.
No, most of them are. Branded the name of that musician?
We branded the name of that musician into the minds of the 120 most powerful music industry, radio industry people for their style of music. And they will remember that name for the rest of their lives. And, every famous artist now did not become famous on their first record. It takes multiple tries. I'm not talking about the 16-year-old Disney stars like Britney and Christina, who had $1 million of Disney money to make their first song a hit. I'm not talking about those.
And a TV show to build a mass audience before they ever sang a note.
So we're not talking about those people. We're talking about indie singer-songwriters. Let's you go back to Dave Matthews and Sheryl Crow. A long gestation period of first exposing their music to everybody and getting people familiar with it, then coming back with a second single, a second record. So we're not thinking that we're unsuccessful on a $3,000 campaign because we have not made the person famous. We have branded them in the best way that they can be branded for the future of their career.
You're planting seeds. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Do you guys have any questions yet?
Consultation.
John goes, my consultation. Yeah, it is very worth mentioning that not everything he does costs thousands of dollars. He will do a consult for a couple $100 and basically give you an overview to tell you where you are on the highway of readiness.
I'm pushing Michael to on this point because it occurred to me during the rally, the mentor sessions and the seminars that I've done over the last several years, that I haven't really mentioned this option. And I thought, and what was so upsetting is so many of the musicians that I met last year who brought their products to me this year. And
go ahead.
Something okay?
Yeah, so good question.
So musicians I met last year, they brought me their products this year, and it was so disappointing holding their products where they had just made mistake after mistake in putting their packaging together. And if they had only come to a third-party person and gotten the feedback, they could have had much better products. And it made me realize I've never told. I have this on my website, which is FlanaganPromotions.com, and it's just doing the consultation. It's not even the commitment to a radio campaign, but it's just allowing me and my team the hours to look at your images, listen to all your songs, pick out your best hooks so that you can, and you talked about song order on the CD. These days, the song order needs to be hit number 1, hit number 2, hit number 3. You need to put your best hits forward. And so we do offer that service. It's on our website to help you choose your images, choose your songs, help you brand your whole project, your website, and anything you want to have advice on, not to mention touring, publishing, and every other subject that I used to work in before I got into radio.
So I want to answer this one because it
Sure.
just flew by. Somebody said you mentioned, meaning me, that I mentioned that people in the industry tend to prefer artists, given all things being equal, that they prefer artists that are better known or have some traction on their own versus not. And he said one of the speakers at the Road Rally had a conflicting point of view. And I think he's speaking about Frank Palazzolo.
Okay.
And Frank, not on your panel. This was
No,
Frank Palazzolo said frequently they want unknown people so that you are not being distracted by the music and taken out of the scene. And he did, in fact, let me finish the thought before I lose it. He did, in fact, say that. I would imagine that is true in some scenes and not others. For instance, if you were in a montage scene where there's no dialogue whatsoever, but the lyric and the song are high in the mix and they're very meaningful to the storyline, you may want an artist that resonates with the audience and has some traction with the audience. But I do agree with what Frank said. If the song is a source music piece that's playing in the background of a bar, the song isn't the star of the scene. So it's largely dependent, in my opinion, on context. Yes.
Exactly right. And
Thank you, John.
So,
Now that I've said, no, hold off, don't talk.
well, that
I just had to focus on the thought, yeah.
I first interrupted because in the theater, Rob Shirelli partner, his
Ron Harris, yeah.
Ron Harris made that same comment, and that's why I interrupted you, because I thought maybe that's where he heard it. He said a similar thing.
Yeah.
He said that Yeah, and he's a producer,
Right.
which is a whole different. So he has a whole different perspective. He's he's looking to shape future stars, and so he's looking for star material. And what he was referring to is that you could have built up a large following of friends that you've met in clubs and stuff who just want to be your friends. And so what if you have 1,000 friends on Facebook? This doesn't give any credibility to you being a star. So I hope that makes sense, that the producers don't have the same view that that radio stations or film supervisors have. They're not looking for stars. They're looking for songs, and they're looking for songs that have acceptance. And social media is one arbiter of acceptance.
Somebody brought up a few minutes ago coming up with a tagline or a unique selling proposition or your branding identity. What if you're new and you're trying to find out what your genre is, which is something you probably encounter all the time, and that's why you do the consults for a couple $100, because you don't want somebody to piss away a couple $1,000 when they don't even know who they are as an artist, right?
Yes.
What percentage of people that come to you actually know that from the get-go? Very small or very...
Who know what their style is?
Yeah, what their strength is, yeah, or genre.
Well, it really is broken down to the experience of the musician. The longer that they have experience, the more they know who they are. And the newer they are, the less they know.
Makes perfect sense.
So on the tagline... You asked a question in there, which was good. What if you're new and you don't know your genre? I have a feeling that person didn't hear the beginning of this talk, because that's exactly what we're saying. Taxi is your ultimate organization for telling you what genre you are. That is really what...
they can certainly find out what their strength is. We don't write back to them and say... by the way, you submitted this for a country listing. This is really more of a pop song.
Oh, you don't?
Well, the reason is that if we do that, we have found in the past that they will then submit it for every pop listing. And as you and I know, or well know, there are all kinds of different pop.
Yeah.
So if you say to somebody, this is really not a country song, it's more of a pop song, in their mind, they only need to hear it from one person, and they will submit it for every pop listing. So we generally discourage the screeners from doing that. However, we do have a thing called a custom critique, where they can submit it not in response to one of the listings, but just as a generic overview. Can you listen to the song? Can you check out the lyrics? Can you check out the structure? Can you tell me which genres you think it works best within? But people do tend to latch on to that, first and only opinion they've gotten, and they will then think of themselves as that thing forever. So it's dangerous to go down that road. So I like asking a bunch of people who are disinterested third parties, so that you can get a little bit of crowdsourcing going on. And if you ask 5 people and 3 of them say pop, then you're probably pop. If you ask 20 people and 16 of them say pop, then you really know that you're a pop. You may want to refine it. What kind of pop? Am I a poppy singer-songwriter like Sheryl Crow? Because once you migrate to the pop charts, then you become a pop artist.
Well, we talked about that, and just to clarify, that any independent musician needs to start off in a format. Pop just means popular, and generally what that's referring to these days is the poppy Katy Perry, Britney Spears type song, very poppy hits. But no independent artist goes into the pop format in the beginning. You've got to start as a rock artist, or a singer-songwriter, or a country artist, or a rap artist. You need to start within a genre, become well-known there, and then that's what carries you on to being a pop star. But in terms of placements for films and all, if they want a pop sound, then if you have a pop sound than you would submit to to pop submissions.
It's tough. Pop has always been the biggest thorn in our side at Taxi since day number one because pop is a moving target. It's a wide target, but a moving target. And I had a lady come up to me. I was standing on the stage at the road rally, and we were between panels getting ready for the next thing. And this woman walks up and starts wagging her finger at me, going, "You guys have too many." She's really raising her voice.
What?
Too many listings that reference Katy Perry. And I said, "I'm sorry. That's what the industry asks for. They want something that sounds like what is currently successful in the marketplace. They want more of that because they know the market wants more of it." And she was really upset with me. And I said, I don't make that stuff up.
Well, one solution. So we talked about. Let's narrow it down to singer songwriter and rock. So if you have a poppier, you can call yourself a pop singer songwriter. That is a category.
Okay.
It's showing that you're a singer songwriter, but you're not I'm trying to think of a more depressing singer-songwriter, but by saying you're a pop singer-songwriter, it's saying that you have a poppier sensibility to your acoustic guitar-driven type music, and you can be a pop country artist.
A pop singer-songwriter,
pop rock.
Which is another tough category.
But it's rock, so it's your basic, it's your fundamentally electric guitar music, but it has a poppier melodic composition.
I'm glad you're bringing this up because our members get quite upset with us when they don't pitch on target, even though in many cases, if not most, we give references. But there are genres like indie, alt, pop, rock.
Okay, indie and alt mean the same thing.
Excuse me. Rockstar burp, sorry. Indie, alt, pop, rock, and people go, "What the hell is that?" But
wait. I want to take that back. Actually, indie and alt are not the same thing, because you can be an indie rap artist. So indie, but so technically, indie means independent, and so everybody that's not on a major label is an independent. However, in the slang of music vernacular, indie became synonymous with alternative. So that's why I was saying that that a professional would not use those two words together because professionals see those words as the same.
Yeah, indie has become a sound. It almost connotates you're a little rough around the edges, maybe your vocal's a little pitchy, but in a good way.
So you're indie and you're alternative,
which means you're not straight down
a little grungy, a little guitar-y,
and not down the center lane of pop.
And then it has a pop sensibility to it, which means it's written in a 3.5 minute time frame with with a catchy melody, as opposed to indie songs that are sort of depressing.
Droney.
And then what was that last part? Indie,
alt, pop, rock. Yeah. I'm telling you, we all sit here scratching our heads, and we have to spend probably an hour or more researching it before we can give our members reference artists.
So in that one, just to address that person, the rock and alternative cancel each other out, because alternative is the alternative to rock. Remember, alternative, which was Nirvana, was the alternative to Kiss.
Right. It's true.
Which ended up being pop rock.
Paulie keeps mentioning the forums, and I would be remiss for those of you who are not watching the feed coming in right now from the chat room. The Taxi forums at forums.taxi.com are a great place to find out what you are. This is crowdsourcing. Go to the peer-to-peer section of the forums and say, do you think this song is this genre or that genre? And see take a vote.
I had one recently, submission, and this woman is a folk artist, and she's just sort of like your Joan Baez type of folk, and she has this PR person who's trying to talk her into going down to Nashville because she says, "Oh boy, I could see you being a country artist," and of course she's trying to get her to pay her way down there and all. And I just had to help her and say, "There's no way you're a country artist. You're from New England. you're."
But I use an acoustic guitar, and on one of the songs I've got a fiddle. We experience that on a pretty regular basis.
Well, yeah. So just because you use a fiddle in a song doesn't mean you're a country
Okay,
artist.
a fiddle and a pedal steel. No. Okay, a couple more questions, and we're going to wrap it up. I'm looking, but I'm not seeing questions. I'm seeing more. Hi, how you doing? Define country. Listen
Twang.
No, listen to country radio. It's not anymore. Well, I mean, can be traditional twangy country. It could be country western. It could be country pop. It could be hip hop. Country is a lot of things, but
Ever since Taylor Swift morphed from being a Nashville artist into being the biggest pop star in the world,
yeah,
the whole country landscape has changed.
Same thing.
Carrie Underwood,
Shania Twain.
Shania Twain was the first one. You're
Yeah.
right.
And everybody in Nashville, all the
everything-
label guys and the radio guys especially, hated Shania Twain when she first broke. Hated her.
And
then
those-
they grew to love her when she attracted a large audience to the radio station.
And I think the word twang is really the word to associate with country. If your music doesn't have twang on it, but so there's that difference between the big country pop stations and the small market country stations that are still playing their local twang.
I'm still not seeing. Oh, question. Who is your ideal customer, John?
One of the biggest problems that I have is when we'll give advice to, I mean, anybody compared to us who's not working full-time in the music business or making their living full-time in the music business is an amateur.
Right.
And so as a professional...
Well, even I'm going to qualify that. We have a lot of members that I don't consider amateur, and they're probably only working on their music 10 or 20 hours a week, but they are, in fact, getting placements all the time. So they earn some money that qualifies them as a professional, but maybe not a full-time pro yet.
Okay, you're right. Those people are... If you're earning money from your music, then you're a pro.
Yeah.
So I meant to say the type of musician that comes to me thinking that they know as much as I do.
That's your ideal customer? Or
that's my worst nightmare. The ideal customer is the one who defers to professional experience. There's so many times, even professional musicians, I have a couple in mind, I don't want to name any names, of actual known touring groups, and they'll say, "Oh, we're putting our packaging together and we're looking to hire you for a radio campaign." And I'll say, "Hey, stop, hold the duplication, let me look over your artwork and your packaging and the layout of the CD and making sure that all the, we have a 50 detail list, on this CD, there's 50 not this one, but I just mean on a CD, there's 50 details covering the back, the front, the spine, the insides, so we have a 50 checklist that we go over, and I'll say, please let us do that before you duplicate the CD. And they're professionals, and they'll say to me, "Oh, we got that covered. Oh no, this isn't our first rodeo. We've done 2 CDs before. I've put together thousands."
Right.
So they're like, "No, we've got it covered. We're professionals. We know everything." I'm like, "Okay." And then a month later, they send in the product, and it's bad. And these are professionals. So even professionals. So I regret saying the word amateur. even a professional who comes to me with an attitude, he can be a professional musician, but he's not a professional marketer and promotion person.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have 1,000 experiences with putting together packages and then delivering them to people and having the reaction.
Is there any one particular instance of a totally virgin artist that came to you and it started out small, gained a little traction, started to smolder, caught on fire, and over some period of time blew up even better than you'd hoped for in the beginning? Do those stories happen, or is that pure fantasy?
Well, we start with unknown artists, and right. What I consider the first, our success is to get them known by the radio community. At the point where they start getting known by the radio community and start growing, mm-hmm. then they sign to a label, and the label has their own promotion team. So right. I never get the...
So it's a thankless job.
It's a thankless job, Michael, please. No, so we never get that, gratification, but there have been many groups that we've started with in the beginning that have grown on to become big, and they're all listed on our website.
What is your website? Just I don't think I've mentioned it at all for these guys.
So it's FlanaganPromotions.com.
And it's spelled like...
Okay. Should we get up closer? Jon Flanagan. And
aren't you on what's the I can't believe cartoon show The Simpsons?
Ned Flanders.
Oh, Flanders, that's what I'm thinking of.
Don't associate me with that nerd. I'm cool, really.
I can't believe I thought his name was Flanagan. I used to watch the show fairly religiously.
I'm really cool, aren't I, Oakley Dokley?
Really, you are. Is he even still on the show?
Oh, yeah.
Or he can die or get written out? All right. Anything that we haven't covered that you think that these guys should know? Because radio promotion, like I said at the top of the show, is mysterious to people. They associate it with slimy guys and payola, and I've seen it work, and I've seen, paper ads. Let's talk about that because we've got a couple minutes left. Paper ads, which, as I mentioned at the Road Rally, there was a 1.5 year period where myself and my business partner managed a band and hired an indie radio promotion company. And every week they would send faxes over. I think this was probably just at the beginning of email, and faxes were still popular. And we got you 4 ads this week, meaning you were added to the rotation playlist of a radio station somewhere. And at some point, I remember saying, this sounds too good to be true. And we started picking up the phone and calling those radio stations. Hi, my name is Michael, and we manage XYZ Group. And our radio promotion company told us that you've recently added the band. And they would go, huh? What? Who? Huh? And we found out that they were just fabricating this stuff and faxing it over. And that's why people have a bad image of radio promotion people, because many of them do stuff like that.
So on the commercial radio level, people are trying to get on the charts to impress record companies, publishers, music supervisors, their family, anybody. They want to get on the chart to impress people. And so getting on that chart requires a reported ad and reported spins. And so there are a group of small market radio stations in the pop world, the top 40, another word for pop is top 40, in the radio format world. There are some group of small market top 40 stations who will do paper ads for the benefit of small prizes.
To give away on their station.
These days they have to give them away, but back when you did it, they were pocketing those little prizes.
Wow.
So those guys were pocketing it, and they gave paper ads. The one confusing thing about that situation you referenced about calling a radio station and them not knowing your name, that happens all the time with college radio and can happen with public radio. because they have a staff of 30 people,
Mm-hmm.
and the rock station, I'm sorry, the rock DJ does his show for 4 hours on Saturday night. So he's never by the phone. In fact, he's always doing beer bongs when he's on the air, and he actually never even turns in a playlist to his boss because he's a college kid and he doesn't care. He's just out there
Right.
for fun. So he's playing the hell out of your song, but nobody knows about it in the rest of the station because the world DJ or the jazz DJ. So if the jazz DJ picks up the phone when you call and go, "Hey, have you heard of my band?" He's going, "No."
We get
And
that
then,
where taxi members will get a forward to RCA Records. They get the receptionist on the phone. Hi, my name is Bob Jones, and taxi forwarded my stuff to your label. Do you know if anybody's listening? The receptionist is going, what? What are you talking? So I do understand that. That also made us smart enough to ask for the right person because we would tell them, this was a straight ahead guitar rock band. So we would talk to the program director or somebody other than the receptionist. It didn't take a long time to figure out that these ads weren't real. But
oh, even a college radio.
I don't remember it being college radio. Honestly, it's been probably 20 years. So I don't really remember who we called.
I have a feeling they gave you those ads on those small market pop stations because they are notorious for doing that. I actually got ripped off when I first started in radio 15 years ago. I hired a top 40 promoter because I only knew AAA singer-songwriter at that time.
Right.
And I hired a top 40 promoter, and he ripped me off in the same way that guy ripped you off. So we both learned the hard way.
Wow. A lot of bad people out there. What's your favorite style of music? Jim Carvalho wants to know.
Jim Carvalho. Wait a minute. That name, why does that name ring?
He was at the Road Rally.
Jim Carvalho. Jim. Right back in, and we did talk about that. I remember you. I remember I can't picture your face, but I remember your name. As we talked about in the beginning, my personal favorite music at this time of my life is singer-songwriter, AAA singer-songwriter. I love melodies. I came up through the rock world, so I still love rock. I love all the big rock bands as long as they have a catchy hook. So I love rock. I love singer-songwriters. But I also love pop songs.
Sorry, didn't mean to stop you, but
No,
here's a question, and we've got like 2 minutes.
Okay.
What do you think about a DIY artist putting together a crew to do a regional-only radio campaign? That's a great question. What do you think about a DIY artist putting together a crew to do a regional-only radio campaign?
Well, we talked about that on the panel, that my company, we are regional campaign specialists. Every campaign we focus regionally because that's where the story is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we strongly recommend regional campaigns. Even when we do a national campaign, we double the focus regionally. And then the rest of the country gets half of the rest of the whole country gets half of the focus that this region gets.
And do you always start in the region that the artist is from because they built a story through playing shows and they've been around forever?
When we take on a new client, we got a giant map on the wall. When we take on a new client, we put a pin in the map saying this artist is here. And then we look at every station within 600 miles and we go, we're targeting all these. And then we go into our computer database and mark all those stations as that client's region. And then when that station comes up on our call list, it gets extra attention. That station will come up twice as much on our call list than the further away stations.
And do you also recommend for that regional promotion campaign that you're doing, do you do a setup where you say to them, look, before you spend that money with us doing the radio promotion, you need to have certain things that we talked about at the head of the show, ducks in a row, which is shows booked, product ready to go, a plan on how you're going to sell that product.
No,
Any of that
no,
stuff play into
no.
it, or do you just get it on radio?
Are we off air now? No. Okay. That you brought up a really key point. That's why I'm interrupting you to get it out. Is as we talked about in the beginning, the process of getting that first spin takes about 6 weeks of work. So from when we launch the CD, it's 6 weeks until anything happens on radio. So, and the other key thing I wanted to say is that the whole publicity PR game is over for independent artists, because no publications, there are very few publications these days. Space in newspapers is very limited, and so you're only going to get write-ups in cities where you have shows. And so to do a PR campaign across the whole country or even regionally is a waste, because no publication in any city is going to care about you unless you're doing a show in that town.
Well, that was my question. Is do you plan the show and stuff in advance of doing the radio campaign?
Well,
so that it all ties together, or is that not the right sequence?
In terms of that, it takes 6 weeks to get on the air, and it takes generally 2 months to book a show. Those two coordinate well. That you would start booking your shows as you start the radio campaign.
Makes sense.
But I guess that one of the key points I was thinking to get to was that generally radio is the starter. That radio is the powerful pin around which everything else revolves. That when you say to the club, first, if you try to get a club without any radio action, they're like, yeah, you're like another 100 bands in my town. Guess what? We're doing a radio campaign, and we're targeting our local radio station. Oh! And in about a month and a half, we're going to start getting some spins.
You mentioned before we went on the air, I believe, I don't think we spoke about this on the air. Maybe we did and I forgot. But social media versus radio. I would imagine that most people watching the show today have Facebook, many forms maybe of social media. And most people probably have 200, 500, 1,000 followers. Maybe some people that are really diligent have 5,000 or 10,000 followers. Give them an idea of how many people that their music is exposed to in a regional radio campaign.
Well,
by comparison,
that's all going to depend on which region it is, because the Northeast has a billion people
because of population density.
And then if you're in Peoria, Illinois, you're going to get exposed to less.
But you get cows. Move.
So the bigger the region, the more listeners. But every region has strong stations that combined reach millions of people.
Okay.
I mean, we're very.
So that's why radio is still viable, because a lot of people say radio is dead or radio is dying.
Radio is the most powerful medium for reaching the audience. More people. The latest Arbitron media-based numbers come out. They keep coming out quarter after quarter, and radio listenership is growing. Now, Spotify listenership is growing also.
Interesting.
But they're not stealing from each other, because the radio listeners are primarily in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole different...
That's another show.
Group.
Because we could do a whole show on when you want to be in radio, prime time, drive time, whatever. All right, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. We will be back next week, and I can't remember who the guest is, but John, thank you. Always enlightening. This guy knows more about radio. Yeah, you saw it, right? He's smart. Jon Flanagan from FlanaganPromotion.com. Right? Not Flanagan Radio Promotion, as I mistakenly said once.
FlanaganPromotions.com, and you can reach it through radio and retail.com also.
Bye, you guys. See you next week.